Section 19 of Tales of Unrest, first part of the Lagoon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Lazarus. Tales of Unrest by Joseph Conrad. The Lagoon. The white man, leaning with both arms over the roof of the little house in the stern of the boat, said to the steersman, "We will pass the night in Arsat's clearing. It is late." The Malay only grunted and went on looking fixedly at the river. The white man rested his chin on his crossed arms and gazed at the wake of the boat. At the end of the straight avenue of forests cut by the intense glitter of the river, the sun appeared unclouded and dazzling, poised low over the water that shone smoothly like a band of metal. The forests, sombre and dull, stood motionless and silent on each side of the broad stream. At the foot of big towering trees, trunkless nipa palms rose from the mud of the bank in bunches of leaves enormous and heavy that hung unstirring over the brown swirl of eddies. In the stillness of the air, every tree, every leaf, every bough, every tendril of creeper and every petal of minute blossom seemed to have been bewitched into an immobility perfect and final. Nothing moved on the river but the 8 paddles that rose, flashing regularly, dipped together with a single splash, while the steersman swept right and left with a periodic and sudden flourish of his blade, describing a glinting semicircle over his head. The churned-up water frothed alongside with a confused murmur, and the white man's canoe, advancing upstream in the short-lived disturbance of its own making, seemed to enter the portals of a land from which the very memory of motion had forever departed. The white man, turning his back upon the setting sun, looked along the empty and broad expanse of the sea reach. For the last 3 miles of its course, the wandering, hesitating river, as if enticed irresistibly by the freedom of an open horizon, flows straight into the sea. Flows straight to the east that harbors both light and darkness. Astern of the boat, the reported call of some bird, a cry discordant and feeble, skipped along over the smooth water and lost itself before it could reach the other shore in the breathless silence of the world. The steersman dug his paddle into the stream and held hard with stiffened arms, his body thrown forward. The water gurgled aloud, and suddenly the long straight reach seemed to pivot on its center. The forests swung in a semicircle, and the slanting beams of sunset touched the broadside of the canoe with a fiery glow, throwing the slender and distorted shadows of its crew upon the streaked glitter of the river. The white man turned to look ahead. The course of the boat had been altered at right angles to the stream, and the carved dragon's head of its prow was pointing now at a gap in the fringing bushes of the bank. It glided through, brushing the overhanging twigs, and disappeared from the river like some slim and amphibious creature leaving the water for its lair in the forests. The narrow creek was like a ditch, tortuous, fabulously deep, filled with gloom under the thin strip of pure and shining blue of the heaven. Immense trees soared up, invisible behind the festooned draperies of creepers. Here and there, near the glistening blackness of the water, a twisted root of some tall tree showed amongst the tracery of small ferns, black and dull, writhing and motionless, like an arrested snake. The short words of the paddlers reverberated loudly between the thick and sombre walls of vegetation. Darkness oozed out from between the trees, through the tangled maze of the creepers, from behind the great fantastic and unstirring leaves, the darkness mysterious and invisible, the darkness scented and poisonous of impenetrable forests. The men poled in the shoaling water. The creek broadened, opening out into a wide sweep of a stagnant lagoon. The forests receded from the marshy bank, leaving a level strip of bright green reedy grass to frame the reflected blueness of the sky. A fleecy pink cloud drifted high above, trailing the delicate coloring of its image under the floating leaves and the silvery blossoms of the lotus. A little house perched on high piles appeared black in the distance. Near it, two tall Nibong palms that seemed to have come out of the forests in the background leaned slightly over the ragged roof, with a suggestion of sad tenderness and care in the droop of their leafy and soaring heads. The steersman, pointing with his paddle, said, "Assad is there. I see his canoe fast between the piles." The polers ran along the side of the boat, glancing over their shoulder at the end of the day's journey. They would have preferred to spend the night somewhere else than on this lagoon of weird aspects and ghostly reputations. Moreover, they disliked Assad, first as a stranger, and also because he who repairs a ruined house and dwells in it proclaims that he is not afraid to live amongst the spirits that haunt the places abandoned by mankind. Such a man can disturb the course of fate by glances or words, while his familiar ghosts are not easy to propitiate by casual wayfarers upon whom they long to wreak the malice of their human master. White men care not for such things, being unbelievers, and in league with the father of evil, who leads them unharmed through the invisible dangers of this world. To the warnings of the righteous they oppose an offensive pretense of disbelief. What is there to be done? So they thought, throwing their weight on the end of their long poles. The big canoe glided on swiftly, noiselessly, and smoothly towards Assad's clearing, till, in a great rattling of poles thrown down, and the loud murmurs of Allah be praised, it came with a gentle knock against the crooked piles below the house. The boatmen, with uplifted faces, shouted discordantly, "Arsad, O Arsad!" Nobody came. The white man began to climb the rude ladder giving access to the bamboo platform before the house. The juragan of the boat said sulkily, "We will cook in the sampan and sleep on the water." "Pass my blankets and the basket," said the white man curtly. He knelt on the edge of the platform to receive the bundle. Then the boat shoved off, and the white man, standing up, confronted Assad, who had come out through the low door of his hut. He was a man, young, powerful, with broad chest and muscular arms. He had nothing on but his sarong. His head was bare, his big soft eyes stared eagerly at the white man. But his voice and demeanor were composed, as he asked, without any words of greeting, "Have you medicine, Tuan?" "No," said the visitor in a startled tone. "No. Why, is there sickness in the house?" "Enter and see," replied Assad in the same calm manner, and, turning short round, passed again through the small doorway. The white man, dropping his bundles, followed. In the dim light of the dwelling he made out, on a couch of bamboos, a woman stretched on her back under a broad sheet of red cotton cloth. She lay still as if dead, but her big eyes, wide open, glittered in the gloom, staring upwards at the slender rafters, motionless and unseeing. She was in a high fever and evidently unconscious. Her cheeks were sunk slightly, her lips were partly open, and on the young face there was the ominous and fixed expression, the absorbed, contemplating expression of the unconscious who are going to die. The two men stood looking down at her in silence. "Has she been long ill?" asked the traveller. "I have not slept for 5 nights," answered the Malay in a deliberate tone. "At first she heard voices calling her from the water, and struggled against me who held her. But since the sun of today rose, she hears nothing. She hears not me, she sees nothing. She sees not me. Me!" He remained silent for a minute, then asked softly, "Tuan, will she die?" "I fear so," said the white man sorrowfully. He had known Assad years ago in a far country, in times of trouble and danger, when no friendship is to be despised. And since his Malay friend had come unexpectedly to dwell in the hut on the lagoon with a strange woman, he had slept many times there in his journeys up and down the river. He liked the man who knew how to keep faith in council and how to fight without fear by the side of his white friend. He liked him not so much perhaps as a man likes his favourite dog, but still he liked him well enough to help and ask no questions, to think sometimes vaguely and hazily in the midst of his own pursuits about the lonely man and the long-haired woman with audacious face and triumphant eyes, who lived together, hidden by the forests, alone and feared. The white man came out of the hut in time to see the enormous conflagration of sunset put out by the swift and stealthy shadows that, rising like a black and impalpable vapour above the tree-tops, spread over the heaven, extinguishing the crimson glow of floating clouds and the red brilliance of departing daylight. In a few moments all the stars came out, and above the intense blackness of the earth and the giant lagoon, gleaming suddenly with reflected lights, resembled an oval patch of night sky flung down into the hopeless and abysmal night of the wilderness. The white man had some supper out of the basket, then, collecting a few sticks that lay about the platform, made up a small fire, not for warmth, but for the sake of the smoke, which would keep off the mosquitoes. He wrapped himself in the blankets and sat with his back against the reed wall of the house, smoking thoughtfully. Arsat came through the doorway with noiseless steps and squatted by the fire. The white man moved his outstretched legs a little. "She breathes," said Arsat in a low voice, anticipating the expected question. "She breathes and burns as if with great fire. She speaks not, she hears not, and burns." He paused for a moment, then asked in a quiet, incurious voice, "Tuan, will she die?" The white man moved his shoulders uneasily and muttered in a hesitating manner, "If such is her fate." "No, Tuan," said Arsat calmly. "If such is my fate, I hear, I see, I wait, I remember. Tuan, do you remember the old days? Do you remember my brother?" "Yes," said the white man. The Malay rose suddenly and went in. The others, sitting still outside, could hear the voice in the hut. Arsat said, "Hear me, speak." His words were succeeded by a complete silence. "Oh, Diamelin," he cried suddenly. After that cry there was a deep sigh. Arsat came out and sank down again in his old place. They sat in silence before the fire. There was no sound within the house, there was no sound near them. But far away on the lagoon they could hear the voices of the boatmen ringing fitful and distinct on the calm water. The fire in the bows of the sampan shone faintly in the distance with a hazy red glow. Then it died out. The voices ceased. The land and the water slept, invisible, unstirring, and mute. It was as though there had been nothing left in the world but the glitter of stars, streaming ceaseless and vain through the black stillness of the night. The white man gazed straight before him into the darkness with wide-open eyes. The fear and fascination, the inspiration and the wonder of death near, unavoidable and unseen, soothed the unrest of his race and stirred the most indistinct, the most intimate of his thoughts. The ever-ready suspicion of evil, the gnawing suspicion that lurks in our hearts, flowed out into the stillness round him, into the stillness profound and dumb, and made it appear untrustworthy and infamous, like the placid and impenetrable mask of an unjustifiable violence. In that fleeting and powerful disturbance of his being, the earth unfolded in the starlight. Peace became a shadowy country of inhuman strife, a battlefield of phantoms, terrible and charming, august or ignoble, struggling ardently for the possession of our helpless hearts. An unquiet and mysterious country of inextinguishable desires and fears. A plaintive murmur rose in the night, a murmur saddening and startling, as if the great solitudes of surrounding woods had tried to whisper into his ear the wisdom of their immense and lofty indifference. Sounds, hesitating and vague, floated in the air round him, shaped themselves slowly into words, and at last flowed on gently in a murmuring stream of soft and monotonous sentences. He stirred like a man waking up, and changed his position slightly. Arsat, motionless and shadowy, sitting with bowed head under the stars, was speaking in a low and dreamy tone. For where can we lay down the heaviness of our troubles but in a friend's heart? A man must speak of war and of love. You, Tuan, know what war is, and you have seen me in time of danger seek death as other men seek life. A writing may be lost, a lie may be written, but what the eye has seen is truth and remains in the mind. "I remember," said the white man quietly. Arsat went on with mournful composure. "Therefore I shall speak to you of love. Speak in the night. Speak before both night and love are gone. And the eye of day looks upon my sorrow and my shame, upon my blackened face, upon my burnt-up heart." A sigh, short and faint, marked an almost imperceptible pause, and then his words flowed on without a stir, without a gesture. "After the time of trouble and war was over, and you went away from my country in the pursuit of your desires, which we men of the islands cannot understand, I and my brother became again, as we had been before, the sword-bearers of the ruler. You know we were men of family, belonging to a ruling race, and more fit than any to carry on our right shoulder the emblem of power. And in the time of prosperity, Si Dendring showed us favour, as we, in time of sorrow, had shown to him the faithlessness of our courage. It was a time of peace, a time of deer hunts and cockfights, of idle talks and foolish squabbles between men whose bellies are full and weapons are rusty. But the sower watched the young rice shoots grow up without fear, and the traders came and went, departed lean and returned fat into the river of peace. They brought news too, brought lies and truth mixed together, so that no man knew when to rejoice and when to be sorry. We heard from them about you also. They had seen you here and had seen you there, and I was glad to hear, for I remember the stirring times, and I always remembered you, Tuan, till the time came when my eyes could see nothing in the past, because they had looked upon the one who is dying there, in the house." End of first part of The Lagoon. Recording by David Lazarus.